I would like to introduce the topic for today. It is the story of Oxfam and Estee Lauder, how they got together, how they created a corporate relationship, how that corporate relationship continues to grow and flourish. Now, Oxfam is a very recognizable brand and a nonprofit with an outstanding reputation. We might not know all of what Oxfam does, but I hope that our speaker, Mr. Ryan Pitts, who is the Senior Officer of Corporate Partnerships, will tell us more about that. Now, this organization, Oxfam, has typically not sought out corporate partnerships for lots of reasons, and he'll tell us that as well. And he'll also tell us what made Oxfam change their mind and get together with Estee Lauder. So let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Pitts. He joined Oxfam in July 2020 as the Senior Officer of Corporate Partnership. This role focuses on workplace giving, employee engagement, cause-related marketing, thought leadership, and other strategies for engaging companies to raise revenue, to increase the ability to achieve Oxfam's mission. Ryan brings strong experience in business strategy, organizational development, communications, negotiations, sourcing new partnership opportunities, and markets. In his last position, Ryan directed sales and business development for the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Love that publication. Really, really good material that comes out of that. And there he helped build partnerships with foundations, nonprofits, and corporate partners. And then there's a little bit more here. And like I said, he is coming to us from Washington, D.C. And he has his master's from Boston University. He's originally from Ohio and is an Ohio State sports fan. So Ryan, look at Mr. Tom's there, huh? Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to press share screen, and then you have a presentation that you're going to share with us and narrate.
Yes, so I can share my screen if that works.
Oh, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yes.
So if we're ready, I'll go ahead and take it away. I think you may have to give me permissions, Joy.
Yes, I just went ahead and I made you a co-host, and I believe that'll
awesome. There we go.
Yes, very good.
Now we're cooking with gas.
All right.
All right. I'll make that full screen. So good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and spend a little time walking you through the partnership evolution, using Estee Lauder companies as the context of this journey that will go on this afternoon. First and foremost, I am a very informal presenter, so I like to interact. So if you have questions as we go along, by all means, feel free to chime in. I love discussion, and so I think that would make it rich for the group. And so I definitely want to make this more of a conversation with you all versus a presentation, but I do have a few slides just to kind of support conversation and context. So we are going to look at Estee Lauder specifically, but I'm going to talk about a lot of things at just a general context level that I think, we can use Estee Lauder as an example, but I think it's applicable across various types of partnerships. So it doesn't have to be specific, but I think it just provides good, hard line, tangible evidence of the way the partnership can go. So if you're like me, you're probably wondering, well, what all are we going to cover? What all are we going to discover in this session? And so I wanted to kind of take a couple of minutes to spell it out for you here. And if I've done my job, there's a few key takeaways that you should have coming out of our discussion today. So of course, I'm going to take you through the corporate journey for Oxfam. I think Joy alluded to it earlier. Corporate partnerships has not always been a primary venture for Oxfam. And we'll kind of talk about what that means and what that's been like, really kind of shifting the narrative around corporate partnerships and how we've been able to arrive at really having a corporate partnerships team and a corporate partnership focus at Oxfam. Then we're going to kind of dive into some various approaches to partnerships, specifically how we approached Estee Lauder for this partnership and how it came to be. But just the different various ways that you can engage partners. I think primarily we often think about partnerships in terms of funding, but we'll talk about some other various approaches towards partnership that really are advantageous to you as a nonprofit organization, and maybe some innovative ways to think about partnering with organizations that don't just require funding up front and that may eventually lead to funding by going through a different channel. Also, it would not be a conversation without discussing the challenges. Through this partnership and through this narrative, you're going to see that it hasn't always been smooth. It hasn't always been a match made in heaven. But I think that this is a good testimony to, if you can get through some of the growing pains, if you can anticipate some of the challenges, it will help you navigate your partnerships even better. In that conversation is also stakeholder consideration. This is, for some of you, Joy mentioned you have international focus in terms of your organization. We will touch on that, but also I just think if you think about the multiple stakeholders, whether that's people within your own organization, whether that's partners you're working with, the communities you're serving, you always want to make sure that you're considering all the stakeholders. Last, really want to talk about how all of these key points basically fold into organically optimizing your partnership. If you do these things well that we discussed today, that we walked through today, I think you really stand the chance to really have dynamic partnerships, not just one-sided, not just one-dimensional, but really, really multifaceted partnerships that are advantageous not only to you as an organization, but also those from the company that, from the partner company that you're working with. So for the key takeaways, if you don't remember anything else today, one of the key takeaways I want you to remember, there is a huge opportunity for nonprofits to capitalize on a disengaged workforce. We're going to dive into some statistics around employee engagement, specifically corporate employee engagement, that really is shining and shedding some light on the opportunities that the nonprofit sector really has to bridge the gap for engagement in terms of corporations. Also, really keeping employee engagement at the core of corporate partnerships. It really all starts with the employee base. We're going to focus on how critical and how crucial employees are to successful corporate partnerships. If you can nurture the employee, you're nurturing the core of the relationship. And as soon as you lose that employee base, as soon as you lose that employee engagement, typically so goes the partnership. So we'll dive into a little bit of that. And then as you get into partnerships, often they evolve, they change. You have to level set, you have to really keep the guardrails on the partnership, making sure that the initial objections and that the initial intentions are being met. And then also, sometimes as you get into the partnership, you discover, hey, we may need to pivot, we may need to go in a different direction. So we'll talk about what all of that looks like. And so those are kind of the key takeaways. If that sounds good to everyone, we'll dive into some of the meat and get started.
And thank you for offering, you made the offer of us asking questions as you go along. So folks, if something does pop into your mind and you'd like Ryan to further explain perhaps something on his slide, by all means, go ahead and raise your hand.
All right. Okay, so we're going to dive into the corporate journey for Oxfam. So for those of you who are familiar, Joy, we are a known organization. A lot of people, if you say Oxfam, do understand Oxfam. But what I will say about Oxfam America, we're not necessarily a household name stateside. Most of our fame, I will say, or most of our recognition is overseas, specifically in Great Britain, where we started. And so we've done a lot of work as Oxfam America to really hone in on our brand, help people understand what we do. So as you know, we're a global organization working to end the injustice of poverty. The way that we do this is helping people build a better future for themselves, holding the powerful accountable, which is a point I really, really want to drive home, and then saving lives in disasters. Oxfam works in over 90 countries around the world. We have 3,000 partner organizations. And we've served about 22 million people in our history. And out of that 22 million people, 53% of those people are women. And so that's really what we're focused on in terms of how we serve the places where we operate. We really are focused on delivering through our partners, but also making sure that we're equitable in the people that we serve, and specifically focused on women. In the next 10 years, or over the next 10 years, Oxfam is really focusing on 4 initiative areas: fair economies, racial justice, gender equality, and climate justice. So we call this our 2030 strategy. We are really holistically focused on engaging our partners in these areas, making sure that we're serving in these areas. As you all know, over the last year, racial justice has been a huge topic that has come to light. Oxfam has always been focused on gender equity, but this is something that is a conversation piece going on in America right now. And so these are huge issues that we are really looking to lead on as an organization, and that we're fighting in pursuit of. So we're really looking to make major strides in these 4 buckets over the next 10 years. This is how we are planning to accomplish this. As I alluded to earlier, Oxfam is really known on the global scale, and we're really looking to continue to revolutionize our brand and our awareness on the global scale, but also we want to make sure that we are not forgetting about the local. So we're making sure that we're connecting our local work, our local initiatives, our local policy, and our local power, but we're bringing that to much more of a global scale. And so we want to work across sectors, we want to work across geographical regions with our partners to make sure that we're being effective at all capacities. Also, we're moving from silos to systems. For any of you that understand Oxfam or understand a confederated nonprofit organization, Oxfam is just that. We are a confederated model. Though we are one Oxfam, we operate as separate entities in the countries that we serve and where we have offices. And so we really want to break down those silos, because often it was OUS is doing this, Oxfam Great Britain is doing this, Oxfam Brazil is doing this, but now we're beginning to have a conversation, so we're much more of a cohesive organization. And so that's also something we're focused on over the next 10 years. How are we leveraging the work of Oxfam, but also bringing it towards partnership? Well, first and foremost, we're leveraging the power of the people and the communities we serve, creating channels of feedback, asking them what they really need in terms of disaster, in terms of poverty, in terms of financial security. Those are conversations that we're having so we can make sure that we're executing our mission on the granular level and really meeting the people where they are and serving the need that's there. Also, Oxfam is a government advocate. We lobby against specific government policies to help the people. We lobby for policies that will advance people, specifically in regards to COVID-19. Our latest initiative with the Biden administration is the People's Vaccine, where we're really seeking to make sure that the vaccine is available and equitable for everyone. And so those are the types of things that we work with the government on. This last bucket is really where I want to talk to you all today, is leveraging corporate power. Traditionally, Oxfam has basically not played nice with our corporate colleagues. We've often have looked at their policies, looked at their supply chains, looked at their ethics within their businesses, practices, and we've really kind of attacked that to make sure that we are bringing those policies, that we're bringing those challenges to light to stand behind our mission as an organization. And so instead of really doing a lot of the offensive work, we're really coming along to create more corporate partnerships, because we recognize that corporations not only have the influence, but they also have the dollars and the value and the funding to change the narrative in the sector. So I'm going to pause there really quick and see if there are any questions about kind of the strategy, how we work with these different entities, and what Oxfam does. If there's any questions, I can kind of pause here and take a quick breath to see if anyone has any questions, comments, or feedback. I think you're on mute, Joy.
I'll just take a look in the chat and see if there's anything
Joy,
in there.
I've got a quick question. Ryan,
So I just have it on mute.
Okay.
Feels good.
Oh, okay, I'll go first. You're going to talk a little bit more on the disengaged workforce, Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay. I'll wait for that. Yeah.
I
Thanks.
know.
Absolutely.
Deb, did you want to ask a question? Okay,
All right. I'll just move on. If there's other questions, I kind of just wanted to pause here to, see if you had any questions about Oxfam, our mission, how we work, what we do, what we're focused on. So I wanted to make sure that's clear so you can understand that context. Now we'll kind of move into the next phase of how we really started to think as an organization. How do we leverage this corporate power? What is our actual opportunities to work in the corporate sector? And what does corporate partnerships look like for Oxfam, given that we often advocate against a lot of what's going on in terms of the corporate sector? So making friends with foes is really kind of the next section of this presentation. And I just want to kind of have conversations to help you all understand the overall outlook. I think Oxfam traditionally had only looked at corporations as an opportunity to do traditional grants. We have a project that you can fund. If you're interested in funding this project, here's a menu of opportunities that we have available. That's traditionally where you see a lot of organizations operate, giving corporations a menu of opportunities of where you can intersect, where they can engage, and where they can interface. But as you can see, and we'll get into this a little bit later, there's so much more opportunity if you can leverage the corporate employees themselves. Of course, the corporation overall holds the purse string, as they say, but if you can leverage the power of the employees themselves, there's really a lot more funding opportunities. But we'll get into that in a bit detail towards the end of the presentation. But I wanted to show you this model to really show you there are a number of revenue opportunities and a number of revenue streams through corporate engagement. However, we see most of that revenue come through traditional corporate grants. And so Oxfam really operated in this space historically. Corporate grants were few and far between. Because we were very purist in our funding and our revenue. We do not accept funding and revenue from corporations that engage in activities that are outside of our mission or things that we advocate against. For example, we do not accept any money from corporations that have investments in arms or tobacco or any type of harmful war initiatives or anything of that nature. So we are very, very ethical in how we determine our partnerships. So as you can imagine, that can get a little bit tough because major corporations often have some sort of investment in conflicting areas with Oxfam. So we'll kind of dive into what that means a little bit later. So Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder comes along with Oxfam, and we've had some early conversations. And before we kind of dive into the specifics of the work with Estee Lauder, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the various ways that partnerships can come to you as an organization. I think it is always key to know, shop your networks. A lot of times, I think when we are wearing our day job hats, we often look at the holisticness of our organizations. We see who would be a good fit, who would be a good vertical, and we often negate our own networks. A lot of times we have contacts from our previous jobs, previous employers, networking events. I think it is always a good opportunity to shop your network, especially as you've moved on to different roles within your organization or as you've moved on to different organizations. It's always great to really refresh your networks, let individuals know you've moved on, where you are, what your role is now, and what you're doing. I say that to say, this is exactly how the Estee Lauder partnership conversation began. My boss in a previous role had worked with someone who was now at Estee Lauder companies in a marketing capacity. Just kind of to make a communication, just to make a contact, She reached out to a friend and said, hey, just want to let you know, I've moved on. I'm in a new capacity at Oxfam. I would love to catch up. It'd be great to talk to you. So this was around March when COVID was first really taking off here stateside. And so the conversation sort of fell by the wayside. Well, when COVID happened, Oxfam immediately pivoted, and we shifted most of our ongoing work and shifted it all to COVID and pandemic response. We were really looking at, food security, water sanitation and hygiene stations, specific pandemic awareness, and getting cash in the hands of those who most needed it. And so in this opportunity, we really were focused on COVID relief. Companies obviously shifted as well as the pandemic grew on and wore on. And so through this communication, my boss's friend candidly replied and said, hey, couldn't be better timing. We're actually looking to get involved with COVID relief. Is there something that we can do as an organization together? So saying that to say, it is always a good opportunity to just keep in communication with your network, because if you stay on partners' radars or potential partners' radars, as opportunities arise, you'll be at top of mind, and it'll be a great opportunity for you to have verticals to engage. So that's just exactly what happened here. And so we said, yeah, we're doing a lot around COVID. Specifically on COVID, we're focused on food security, which is hunger relief, and we're focused on gender-based violence. So these are two categories where we really would love to have some financial support. So Estee Lauder said, great, but we actually have a focus specifically in Africa. The reason that Estee Lauder, being a global company, they had 4 specific markets that they really wanted to focus on because they had offices there, but also because they had markets that they were trying to get off the ground and communities that they were trying to support. So those 4 markets were South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. It just so happens that Oxfam America has country offices in the Confederation that are strong in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. And so just kind of things started to fall into place and make perfect sense that this was the right avenue for us to come together and begin to work together on the collaborative COVID relief project in these specific 4 markets. So, match made in heaven, everything sounds perfect, everything sounds phenomenal. But this is where it starts to get a tad bit complicated. So what I will say is managing multiple stakeholders. It is great that we had country affiliate offices in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. And it was also great that our partner had affiliates in these areas as well. Our strongest connection, Estee Lauder themselves, they have a corporate headquarters in South Africa, and one of our strongest affiliates is actually our South African office. So there was a strong focus on really making sure that we did a lot of the innovative work in the South African market. So at this juncture, we have a total of 8 country offices outside of the country, outside of stateside. And then we have Oxfam America operating from Washington, D.C. And so we have at least 9 stakeholders already that we're navigating on top of the communities and the projects that we're executing on. And so that's one thing to keep in mind as you are working with partners and as you are taking on projects and as you start to begin to receiving grant money, really evaluating your capacity to take on the work and evaluating your capacity to execute on the work is something to consider. We all want as much funding as possible, but there's nothing worse than getting funding and not being able to fulfill the target of the funding. You're going to run the risk of ruining the partnership. You're going to run the risk of tarnishing your reputation as being an effective organization. And it's really just going to be something that you take on that it really bogs you down as an organization that doesn't end up being successful in the end. So I want to pause here and definitely say, as multiple stakeholders are great, as a dynamic partnerships are great, you really want to make sure that you're in the space to take on what you're receiving, and making sure that as you are working with the stakeholders, do you have an action and a communication plan to work with these stakeholders? So one of the things we found out very quickly, obviously there's a huge time difference to working across multiple markets. And so information comes in piecemeal. You have to really kind of summarize this all through a 24-hour period. So you're never really seeing the full picture in real time. You have to get the information over a 24-hour period of time. So that's something we considered as well. And also, one thing I'll mention as we're talking about multiple stakeholders is culturally. As you work with partners, that culture is something to consider. Yes, these are all countries within Africa. However, there's different cultures amongst the countries. Also within corporate to nonprofit. Nonprofits, we are notorious for our Rolodex and our lexicon of abbreviations, and corporates are much more succinct and straight to the point. And so those are things to consider, really the personalities, the cultures of your stakeholders, the geographical locations of your stakeholders. All of these things are things to consider as you start to take on partnership, just to ensure that you have the ability and the capacity and the manpower to ensure success. So I'll pause there before we kind of get into the next section of lessons learned to see if there's any questions really about how the partnership came to be, how we decided on these markets, and how we decided to do the work. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions.
Ryan, are you going to talk any more about the comment you made about being purist?
Yes.
Okay,
So,
year or later?
We're actually talk about this on the next slide.
Okay.
So good segue, Joy. I really appreciate it. So here, I want to talk about some of the challenges off the top and some of the lessons learned as we got into the work of the partnership. We kind of alluded to it in the last slide. Working with multiple stakeholders, you're going to want to give updates as the project goes along. Who better to give the updates than the people on the ground executing and doing the work? And so one of the things we did right up front is we wanted our country teams to actually report out on the work that was taking place. I managed the overall partnership. However, the partners themselves on the ground were the best to tell the story about what was going on. The reason why we wanted to do that is because, one, we wanted our funder to hear, exactly what was happening real time on the ground. But two, if there were challenges, if there were nuances, if there were caveats that needed to be discussed, who better to hear it from than the people that were actually boots on the ground? So that was one, as soon as we began this partnership, we created a schedule where we did periodic updates and report outs from the markets themselves to the funder. So saying that to say, as you are creating your partnerships, one of the lessons learned is to really create a communication strategy to communicate the impact and the work that is taking place. It works twofold. It keeps the partner engaged in the work. It helps them see their dollars in action, but also it creates a channel of communication with where the work is being done. It really creates this investment from the partner's perspective of, this is what we're doing, this is the work that we're supporting, and this is the funding in action. And so it really gives them a connection to the work. It's not like they just wrote a check and then just kind of said, Godspeed. They're really getting to see how it evolves and how it grows. And so that's one big takeaway that I would say has been helpful to Oxfam, is really communicating at every step of the way, specifically through those markets, to share the work and the impact updates with our partners. Also, as you create partnerships, you typically deal with people in specific departments. They control the purse strings, they control the grant renewals, so on and so forth. But typically the employees themselves never really get to hear about the work that's being done at a high level. They may know that their employer is a good corporate social responsible citizen. However, they don't know the specifics. They don't know the nuts and bolts of the work. They also don't know how they can get involved in the work or how they can support the work themselves from the employee level. And so what we also did as we updated the partner on the work, we also wanted them to internally update their employees on the partnership. That worked in a couple of ways. It got the employees excited about what was going on in terms of the partnership with Oxfam and Estee Lauder, but also it got them curious because as they got the information that this partnership was taking place, they wanted to know what was happening, how successful it was, and how they could get involved. And so we started out with a written communication, just really announcing the partnership, sharing with their employees what was going on, what the intentions of our work were going to be, and some of the highlights that we were looking to resolve through this partnership. As that took place, it really generated the buzz where employees wanted to learn more and hear more about the partnership, to where now we are doing quarterly town halls with their employees. So saying that to say, if you announce the partnership internally, and if you share that you're partnering with the organization with their staff, but also with your staff, you get buy-in from both parties. And that buy-in is going to be crucial in terms of retention of the partnership. Because if you have staff buy-in, if you have staff influence and staff is really excited, it makes it really, really hard at the decision maker level to pull out of that deal when your employees are very, very excited about it. And from the inside perspective as a nonprofit, it's an accountability thing. You've said this is what we're going to execute on, so now we're being held accountable internally to what we've said we're going to do. Getting back to the quarterly town halls, it has been a wonderful exchange between us and the staff. It's created some dynamic connections because, as I said earlier, we've had an opportunity for those specific markets, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. We've had staff from those offices share with the Estee Lauder staff in those specific locations, which has now created relationships at that level. Of course, with COVID and the pandemic happening, we haven't had opportunities to engage directly, but if it was a different scenario, obviously that would have naturally created opportunities for the employees to engage directly in those locations at those sites. And so really any opportunity or any opportunities you can create to really share the work with the staff and the employees of a partner organization, I would say go for it by all means. And also, just like we were saying earlier, and just as I alluded to earlier, if you have the opportunity to have market specific or boots on the ground staff share updates, it's really, really a powerful way to really get investment from the partner as well. Outside of staff communications, one of the things that we saw evolve through this partnership was a need and a desire to want to market our partnership externally. External marketing is a great thing because what it does for your organization, it gives you free publicity. A lot of times partnering with corporations, they have the means to market, they have the teams to market, they have the bandwidth and the technology to do it on a grand scale. And so anytime a corporation wants to announce that they're partnering with your organization, it's typically free positive publicity. However, on the flip side of that, through Oxfam, and this is getting back to the purest the purity of our mission, we have had several challenges in terms of being able to market this partnership. The reason being is because we have looked at everything in terms of Estee Lauder's business practices. And when you market a partnership, not only are other nonprofit organizations going to say, hey, Oxfam's partnering with the private sector, but this organization or this particular company has these strikes against it. So for example, I'll give you a specific example. Estee Lauder in their supply chain uses palm oil. For Oxfam, that is one of the industries and one of the issue areas that we are holistically focused on in terms of advocating against in the private sector. So Estee Lauder, through the development of this partnership and through the progression of this partnership, as things really got off the ground and went really well in our COVID work, has now wanted to take on an Instagram campaign where they announced this partnership on their global Instagram handle. This caused a huge bump in the road for our partnership at Oxfam. Because initially communications were not supposed to be a part of this partnership. We were really just going to execute the work. We were focused on COVID. Marketing was not something we wanted to do. We were really just focused on the work. So when the grant money came in, we didn't really screen in a way that looked at anything publicly facing. But the partnership went so well that Estee Lauder was like, we have to talk about this. And so now we want to do this via social media. And so Oxfam America said, that's fantastic, that's wonderful, that's great, but we're going to need to pump the brakes on that and do our due diligence. So internally at Oxfam America, we have an ethical screen committee. So any partnership where there's any funding, we do an initial screen. If they don't hit any of our major 3 target areas, which are arms, I think we have another participant trying to come in. So as long as they don't hit any of our 3 major no-go areas, we can work with them for funding. But when it comes to announcing that partnership on a public level, then there's another screen process that we must go through. And in this other screen process, the palm oil screen came up and the palm oil issue came up. And unfortunately, we were told initially that we were not going to be able to proceed with the social media campaign with Estee Lauder. So as you can imagine, the partnership was going fantastically well. It was going swimmingly. We were best of friends. And there's nothing worse than going back to a partner and saying, thanks, but no thanks. And so what we were able to do is go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we're working with Estee Lauder in 4 different markets. Although we are one Oxfam, we are a confederated model with other country offices. Remember earlier when I said Estee Lauder has a headquartered office in South Africa, and one of our largest country offices was in South Africa. So the way that we were able to navigate this was to redirect the conversation to saying, hey, why don't we specifically highlight the work we're doing in South Africa? This helps us in twofold. It helps promote the country office locally in South Africa, and it helps get excitement around the work locally in South Africa. But it also helps Estee Lauder to be able to tell the story about how they are partnering with a global organization such as Oxfam, was doing some specific work in their backyard. And so as you kind of think about taking on partnerships, I would definitely caution you and encourage you to think about, as the partnership buds and grows, are you going to be able to publicly display this partnership? Are there going to be any challenges or any kickback or any negativity by announcing that you're partnering with this organization? Funding is fantastic, but if you can't tell the story of that funding publicly, you're really kind of hamstrung. And we as an organization, and I specifically in my role, want to see more communications around partnerships, because I want people to see some of the great work we're doing within the private sector, because I want the private sector to be a partner. We want them to come alongside of the work that we're doing. We don't want them to be the enemy. Historically, we've been advocating against a lot of what is going on in the private sector, but now we're shifting that narrative to say, hey, we want to work together because we're better together and we can accomplish more together. but we need to be able to make sure that as we are announcing this public work, that we are not disregarding or discrediting our mission. So I hope that that kind of makes sense and kind of gives light to how you look at a partnership holistically. And even though it can be going great and swimmingly well, there are often times where the rubber meets the road and you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. But I think if you can think about it together and think about it in nuanced ways, you can always salvage the partnership and move on in a productive manner. So any questions before I move on to the last couple of slides and we can kind of have discussion? All right, if there's nothing, I'll go ahead and finish up. So as you can see, the partnership has evolved, and through the way that we were simply trying to make sure that we were updating the stakeholders in terms of Estee Lauder, the decision makers and the grant funders of our work, and making sure that we were showing them that we were an effective organization. Through those communications, it really opened up a door for us to have a channel to their employees, which has now become such a critical part of the partnership. The reason being is a lot of times employees are not engaged. And when I say engagement, we all have a high level understanding of what engagement is. But we are really looking at through an Oxfam lens to engaging employees in a more dynamic way. Statistics show that 87% of employees are not engaged in the work that they do. So that's a huge opportunity for us as nonprofits to really start engaging corporate employees in meaningful work. A lot of times corporations and corporate employees expect their employers to be social responsible champions, to have outlets for them to be able to engage in the communities that they work and serve. And if they don't have these opportunities, the employees themselves are going to be disengaged. So we as nonprofit organizations really have a huge opportunity to capitalize on this disengagement, to really start providing opportunities to partner at the employee level. And as you can see, if there's employee buy-in, then the corporations themselves are going to need to fall in line. So some of the ways that we're doing this is through education and awareness, just like we're doing with the town halls, having conversations about the work that we're doing, some of the things, the policies that we're advocating for, what we're doing in other markets. I think it's great to always kind of share. You can do this through having lunch and learns like we're doing now. You can do this through written communications. You can do this through digital marketing. Any way that you can really get your brand and your awareness and your mission statement out there in the corporate sector, just so the employees have a familiarity with you, so there's buy-in. And once you get that buy-in, then they're going to want to invest in your organization in a different way. And so a lot of that comes through corporate volunteerism. In these COVID times, we're not allowed to, or we're not really seeing a lot of opportunities to engage face-to-face. And so a lot of this can take place virtually. And one of the focuses that we're focused on is skills-based volunteering. Skills-based isn't your traditional volunteering where you're handing out water bottles at a 5K or stuffing emergency relief kits after a disaster. It's really taking corporate skill sets and helping your organization build capacity. If you need back office help, if you need accounting help, and corporate employees are always willing to donate their time and talent to your organization to help it build capacity. So as you're thinking about volunteerism and engaging the corporate sector, think about areas where you need capacity. That's another way of volunteerism where you can really engage the corporate sector. And if they have a good experience volunteering for your organization, 9 times out of 10, those corporate volunteers can be converted into corporate donors. They're going to want to invest with their dollars. They really see that the work of your organization, the work that you're doing, they believe in it because they've experienced themselves. And so they're willing to invest in a different way. So here are kind of just some high level areas and ways and approaches that we are approaching the corporate sector to really create more dynamic partnerships. So as you can see, this graphic makes a little bit more sense. You see the traditional corporate grant where Oxfam was focused historically, but now we've created a much more dynamic streams of revenue through volunteer grant programs, through volunteerism, through workplace giving, corporate matching, and emergency response campaigns. So these are all the ways that now we have opportunity with Estee Lauder because we have buy-in, we have familiarity, we have a brand and awareness with their employees at Estee Lauder and our other partners, that now we can engage them in a different way that perhaps just started out as a grant. Now we have opened the door for many, many other channels of revenue. So in the last couple of seconds, and I promise you all I'm wrapping up, we just really have been able to kind of steward some organic conversions. We are now in discussions with Estee Lauder about what the new iteration of our partnership will be. The first phase of our work comes to conclusion in August. And so we'll be wrapping up our work around COVID in August. And so we're now in discussions about what's next. We're exploring employee giving and skills-based volunteering because we've created connections with the offices and the staff in Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa. So there's definitely some opportunities and some willingness to do some skills-based volunteering in those markets. And then of course, they've seen that we're effective stewards of our dollar. So their employees themselves are very, very interested in doing a workplace giving campaign where they directly support Oxfam. And so that's fantastic. These are all opportunities that have come through just natural organic conversion because we focused on stewarding the partnership well, working through the growing pains, and really navigating corporate partnerships, which was a nuance for Oxfam in general. And so if I've done my job well, hopefully you can see through this specific case study and through the specific example, there is a huge opportunity to capitalize on a disengaged workforce. We really have an opportunity to work partnership channels through the employee realm. Employee engagement is going to be a huge component of any successful corporate partnership. Once you have the money, you're going to want to make sure you're engaging their employees in a dynamic way. And then as you kind of get into the partnership itself, anticipate that it will evolve. It may not end the way that you envision it ending, and that's okay. As long as you're accomplishing the task, as long as you're keeping the partnership alive, as long as the work and the mission of your organization is being accomplished, then it's the job well done. And so with that, I will quit talking and turn it over for discussion. It's been such a pleasure to kind of walk you through the journey of Oxfam and Estee Lauder.